Good morning, sixth grade readers. So today is Wednesday, February the 10th, and today I'm going to read a short story read aloud. It's a paired passage, so it ties into our nonfiction text yesterday that was about Japanese internment camps after the bombing of Pearl Harbor during World War II. So I want to go ahead and share some concepts with you. First of all, I want to go back because it's been a while since we've done a read aloud and we've done fiction. I want to talk a little bit about our plot diagram and remember kind of the things that are included in our plot diagram. So the exposition is the beginning of the story, and that includes when the characters and setting are introduced. And then events start happening during our rising action, and we kind of get to know the characters and find out what the central conflict is in the story that kind of pushes that whole story forward and drives the plot. And then the most exciting thing is the climax or turning point of the story. So remember, if I'm going to divide this in half, the climax happens a lot further than halfway in the story. And then the falling action is very quick compared to the rising action. And then your resolution is literally that last thing that happens in the story. And then tying into our central conflict, we want to think about themes, which are life lessons or things we learn either through the characters, that the characters learn through their experience, and we as readers learn through them and the story. So I just want to kind of touch base on all of those things. Don't forget you are testing. It's a paired passage test. So it will be on Friday, and it's open book and open notes. And it is over the nonfiction article and the short story that I'm going to do as a read aloud. So if you would go to your read aloud section, remember that third tab, that green tab, and open up to where we have a clean page. So maybe All Summer in a Day might have been the last thing we did as a read aloud. I'm not sure, but go to your next two clean pages and set that up for the bracelet. Okay, and it's a short story, so I'm going to put it in parentheses. And the author, her name is Yoshiko. She's Japanese American. Uchida. I'll put by. Yoshika Uchida. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and close this so I can begin the story. I do want to show you a quick image. So when we were reading our nonfiction article yesterday, one of the camps, the internment camps where they imprison the Japanese Americans, was called Manzanar, and it said it was in the foothills of the Sierra Nevada mountains, I believe, in California. And so here's an actual picture, and it says at Manzanar, students walked from their barracks to their classroom. So, and then that nonfiction article, it talked about the fact that they had created their own schools within the internment camps to kind of normalize their life and keep it going. So, all right, let's start with another image before I start reading, actually. Okay, so here is our author. Her name is Yoshika Uchida, and I just want to read this little bit here. It says, writing to keep it from happening again. Yoshika Uchida was in her last year of college when the United States entered World War II. Like most people of Japanese descent on the West Coast, Uchida and her family were uprooted by the government and forced to go to an internment camp. She and her family lived at Tanforan Racetrack in Horse Stall 40. Uchida later gave the same address to the fictional family in her short story, The Bracelet. Uchida said that in writing about the internment camp, she tried to give readers a sense of the courage and strength that enabled most Japanese Americans to endure this tragedy. Okay. So you can take notes as I read The Bracelet. Mama, is it time to go? I hadn't planned to cry, but the tears came suddenly, and I wiped them away with the back of my hand. I didn't want my older sister to see me crying. It's almost time, Rory, my mother said gently. Her face was filled with a kind of sadness I had never seen before. I looked around at my empty room, the clothes that Mama always told me to hang up in the closet, the junk piled on my dresser, the old rag doll I could never bear to part with. They were all gone. There was nothing left in my room, and there was nothing left in the rest of the house. The rugs and furniture were gone, the pictures and drapes were down, and the closets and cupboards were empty. The house was like a gift box after the nice things inside were gone, just a lot of nothingness. Oh, I love that she used a simile to describe that. So let me get back to my page again and I'll reread that for you. It said, the house was like a gift box after the nice things inside were gone, just a lot of nothingness. That makes me think of, right, our bridge map and the fact that the house was like an empty gift box. Yep. Right. And so that kind of symbolized, it says, um, just like a lot of nothingness, symbolized how maybe everything special was taken from them, or really like left behind, even would be more explicit. Okay, so those are the kind of notes that you guys can be taking as I go. I'm not going to take any more notes, but that's just an example of what you could be doing. It was almost time to leave our home, but we weren't moving to a nicer house or a new town. It was April 21st, 1942. The United States and Japan were at war, and every Japanese person on the West Coast was being evacuated by the government to a concentration camp. Mama, my sister Kiko, and I were being sent from our home and out of Berkeley and eventually out of California. Okay, so I feel like we've kind of got our exposition set up, right? Our characters so far are our first person narrator, Rory, her mom, and her older sister, Kiko, right? And then the setting, like it said, was Berkeley, California, maybe in her house that they were about to leave. The doorbell rang, and I ran to answer it before my sister could. I thought maybe by some miracle a messenger from the government might be standing there, tall and proper and buttoned into a uniform, come to tell us it was a terrible mistake, that we wouldn't have to leave after all. Or maybe the messenger would have a telegram from Papa, who was interned in a prisoner of war camp in Montana because he had worked for a Japanese business firm. Okay, some more information revealed, right? So it says Papa, if you want to write this down, was interned in a prisoner of war camp in Montana because he was a Japanese businessman. Stop at any point and pause this if you want to write anything down. The FBI had come to pick up Papa and hundreds of other Japanese community leaders on the very day that Japanese planes had bombed Pearl Harbor. The government thought they were dangerous enemy aliens. If it weren't so sad, it would have been funny. Papa could no longer be dangerous than the mayor of our city, and he was as every bit a loyal American to the United States. He had lived here since 1917. Okay, and right, this is 1942. So to me, that's a contrast and contradiction, right? Because they think he's dangerous, but Rory, our first person narrator, knows her dad isn't dangerous at all, but they still took him away. When I opened the door, it wasn't a message from anywhere. It was my best friend, Lori Madison, from next door. She was holding a package wrapped like a birthday present, but she wasn't wearing a party dress, and her face drooped like a wilted tulip. Oh, another good simile. Let me read that again. Her face drooped like a wilted tulip. I can see that good imagery in my mind. Hi, she said. I came to say goodbye. She thrust the present at me and told me it was something to take to camp. It's a bracelet, she said before I could open the package. Put it on so you won't have to pack it. She knew I didn't have 1 inch of space left in my suitcase. We had been instructed to take only what we could carry into camp, and Mama had told us we could each take only 2 suitcases. Then how are we going to pack the dishes and blankets and sheets they told us to bring with us, Kiko worried. I don't really know, Mama said, and she simply began packing those big impossible things into an enormous duffel bag, along with umbrellas, boots, a kettle, hot plate, and flashlight. Who's going to carry that huge sack? I asked. But Mama didn't worry about things like that. Someone will help us, she said. Don't worry. So I didn't. It seems like Rory is very worried and Mom isn't worried at all. We don't know what Mom is thinking because we only know first person from Rory's point of view, but I'm wondering if Mom's really this calm or if she's just like pretending to be calm, for the kids' sake. Lori wanted me to open her package and put on the bracelet before she left. It was a thin gold chain with a heart dangling on it. She helped me put it on, and I told her I would never take it off, ever. Well, goodbye then, Lori said awkwardly. Come home soon? I will, I said, although I didn't know if I would ever get back to Berkeley again. Okay, so I feel like our central conflict, is kind of developed. And maybe it's that idea that Rory is leaving her home and all of her life behind, right? And it's upsetting to her, obviously. So maybe that's the central conflict. I watched Lori go down the block, her long blonde pigtails bouncing as she walked. I wondered who would be sitting in my desk at Lincoln Junior High now that I was gone. Lori kept turning and waving, then walking backward for a while until she got to the corner. I didn't want to watch anymore, and I slammed the door shut. The next time the doorbell rang, it was Mrs. Simpson, our other neighbor. She was going to drive us to the Congregational Church, which was the civil control station where all the Japanese of Berkeley were supposed to report. It was time to go. Come on, Rory, get your things, my sister called to me. It was a warm day, but I put on my sweater and coat so I wouldn't have to carry them, and I picked up my 2 suitcases. Each one had a tag with my name and our family number on it. Every Japanese family had to register and get a number. We were family number 13453. Wow. That reminds me of like when you go to prison and you get a number and they don't call you by your name anymore, you're just prisoner number. Like how dehumanizing, right? To be this family, this little girl, and have this number. Mama was taking one last look around our house. She was going from room to room as though she were trying to take a mental picture of the house she had lived in for 15 years so she would never forget it. I saw her take a long last look at the garden that Papa loved. The irises beside the fish pond were beginning to bloom. If Papa had been home, he would have cut the first iris blossom and brought it inside to Mama. This one is for you, he would have said, and Mama would have smiled and said, Thank you, Papa San, and put it in her favorite cut glass vase. But the garden looked shabby and forsaken now, and Papa had gone, and Mama was too busy to take care of it. It looked the way I felt, sort of empty and lonely and abandoned. Ooh, that's really good internal conflict, right? So on the inside, remember internal on the inside and external on the outside, I was feeling like the garden looked empty and lonely and abandoned. When Mrs. Simpson took us to the civil control station, I felt even worse. I was scared, and for a minute, I thought I was going to lose my breakfast right in front of everybody. More internal conflict, right? So she's literally feeling sick inside, internal. There must have been over 1,000 Japanese people gathered at the church. Some were old and some were young. Some were talking and laughing and some were crying. I guess everybody else was scared too. No one knew exactly what was going to happen to us. We just knew we were being taken to the Tanforan racetracks, which the army had turned into a camp for the Japanese. There were 14 other camps like ours on the West Coast. We gathered, sorry. What scared me the most were the soldiers standing at the doorway of the church hall. They were carrying guns and mounted bayonets. I was wondering if we would try to run away. Wait, I was wondering if they thought we would try to run away or whether they'd shoot us or come after us with their bayonets if we did. So again, like this is all internal, right? A long line of buses waited to take us to camp. There were trucks, too, for our baggage, and Mama was right. Some men were there to help us load our duffel bag. When it was time to board the buses, I sat with Kiko and Mama sat behind us. The bus went down Grove Street and past a small Japanese food store where Mama used to order her bean curd cakes and pickled radish. The windows were all boarded up, but there was a sign still hanging on the door that read, "We are loyal Americans." That's kind of like a text to text connection because I remember in our nonfiction text from yesterday, that article, that it talked about how they tried to seem loyal to America, right? And they wrote newspaper articles and they waved flags and did all this thing. So this was one of the things they did to seem American and loyal, right? Is put signs on the door. We are loyal Americans. The crazy thing about the whole evacuation was that we were all loyal Americans. Most of us were citizens because we were born there. But our parents who had come from Japan couldn't become citizens because there was a law that prevented any Asian from becoming a citizen. Now, everybody with a Japanese face was being shipped off to a concentration camp. Wow. I never knew that there was a law that prevented them from becoming citizens at that time. It's stupid, Kiko muttered as we saw the racetrack looming up beside the highway. If there were any Japanese spies around, they would have gone back to Japan long ago. I'll say, I agreed. My sister was in high school and she ought to know, I thought. When the bus turned into Tanforan, there was more armed guards at the gate, and I saw barbed wire strung around the entire grounds. I felt as though I was going into a prison, but I hadn't done anything wrong. Again, right? Another contrast and contradiction. We streamed off the buses and poured into a huge room where the doctors looked down our throats and peeled back our eyelids to see if we had any diseases. Then we were given our housing assignment. The man in charge gave Mama a slip of paper. We were in Barrack 16, apartment 40. Mama, I said, we're going to live in an apartment. The only apartment I had ever seen was the one my piano teacher lived in. It was in an enormous building in San Francisco with an elevator and thick carpeted hallways. I thought how wonderful it would be to have our own elevator. A house was all right, but an apartment seemed elegant and special. We walked down the racetrack looking at Barrack 16. Mr. Noma, a friend of Papa's, helped us carry our bags. I was so busy looking around, I slipped and almost fell on the muddy track. Army barracks had been built everywhere, all around the racetrack and even in the center oval. Mr. Noma pointed beyond the track towards the horse stables. I think your barrack is out there. He was right. We came to a long stable that had once housed the horses at Tanforan, and we climbed up the wide ramp. Each stall had a number painted on it, and when we got to number 40, Mr. Noma pushed the door open. Well, here it is, he said, apartment 40. The stall was narrow and empty and dark. There were two small windows on each side of the door. Three folded army cots were on the dust-covered floor, and one light bulb dangled from the ceiling. That was all. This was our apartment, and it still smelled of horses. Okay, what a contrast and contradiction to what she thought this elegant apartment was going to be, because that's all she knew, and then the fact that they were living in a smelly horse stall, right? Mama looked at my sister and then at me. It won't be so bad when we fix it up, she began. I'll ask Mrs. Simpson to send me some material for curtains. I could make some cushions too. And well, she stopped. She couldn't think of anything more to say. Okay, I'm really struck when we think about character traits at how the mom seems really optimistic, right? You might want to write that down. That like she has this, Rory's all depressed and mama's trying to make things better. Like this is going to be okay. I can fix it up. Very optimistic and cheery. Again, I don't know if she really feels that way inside, but she's certainly showing that on the outside. Mr. Noma said he'd go get some mattresses for us. I'd better hurry before they're all gone. He rushed off. I think he wanted to leave so he wouldn't have to see my mama cry. But he needn't run off because mama didn't cry. She just went out to borrow a broom and began sweeping out the dust and dirt. Will you girls set up the cots? She asked. It was only after we put the last cot up that I noticed my bracelet was gone. I've lost Lori's bracelet. I screamed, my bracelet's gone. We looked all over the stall and even down the ramp. I wanted to run back down the track and go over every inch of ground we walked on, but it was getting dark and Mama said, she wouldn't let me. I thought of what I'd promised Lori. I wasn't ever going to take the bracelet off, not even when I took a shower. And now I had lost it in my first day at camp. I wanted to cry. Okay, this seems like the climax, right? Because she felt awful about leaving her world behind. And then this kind of symbol of what her life before was from her best friend is lost. I kept looking for it all the time we were in Tanforan. I didn't stop looking until the day we went to another camp called Topaz in the middle of the desert in Utah. And then I gave up. But Mama told me never mind. She said I didn't need a bracelet to remember Lori, just as I didn't need anything to remember Papa and our house in Berkeley or all the people and things we loved and had left behind. Those are things we can carry in our hearts and take with us no matter where we are sent, she said. And I guess she was right. I've never forgotten Lori, even now. Hmm. Okay, let me read those words again that Mama said, because those are kind of like words of wisdom, right? Mama told me to never mind. She said I didn't need a bracelet to remember Lori, just as I didn't need anything to remember Papa or our house in Berkeley or all the people and things we love and had left behind. All those things we can carry in our hearts and take with us no matter where we are sent. That it might even turn into like the theme of the story, right? Because it's called the bracelet. So it must be important that that bracelet symbolizes the life they've left behind. And even though she's lost it, that she still has those memories of Lori, and that can't be taken away. I think that's a good theme. And then I also think about, it's kind of corny to say don't judge a book by its cover, but if you're thinking about how all of these people were being treated poorly because of the color of their skin or where their ancestors came from, that they looked Japanese, so they must be bad, but they really weren't bad people at all, that could be another theme too. I hope you can think of some themes and maybe come up with something even different. All right. I hope you enjoyed our story, The Bracelet.